any sort of a deal. No, we go from here because now there's no deal.
Our next guest spends her life's work dissecting the moves of Kim Jong-un. Jean Lee is Director of Asia Programs at the Wilson Center, and she joins us now. We're curious to find out what you thought of this.
Well, this certainly wasn't what I expected when I woke up this morning. But what it shows is just how tough this negotiation is. This is a complicated process. And I have to say, there will be a lot of discussion about whether President Trump made the right decision. I do think it's not something you can rush into. The stakes are very, very high, not only for North Korea, but also for the United States. But I have to say, what I want to say is that I'm disappointed with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
He does have to make the decision to give up key elements of his nuclear program if he wants to put this relationship on the right track.
Sure.
And this relationship, this resolving this relationship, repairing this relationship with the United States is essential. It's key, not only to telling his people that they can move on from this Korean War conflict and focus on the economy, on improving their lives, but remember that it is key also to lifting those sanctions. Until he gives these up, he's not going to have those sanctions lifted, and he's not going to have an improvement in his economy.
And Jean, the deal was apparently he said, okay, I'll denuke this one facility, but not anything else. And the president said, well, if I'm going to give up all the sanctions, I got to walk away. Jean, ultimately, I think Kim and the North Koreans, not used to having an American president get up and say, bad deal. See you next time. Goodbye, everybody.
So they were banking on that unpredictability working in their favor. In this case, it didn't. What will be interesting to see is what happens next. How will the North Koreans spin this? He will certainly be huddling with his advisors in trying to figure out how to save face. That's very important in Korean culture. There's very little room for that. But will they portray this as a rupture that is standard in the course of diplomacy, or will they use this as an occasion to stall these negotiations and turn back to this period of tensions that we had? I really hope that that's not the case, and that we'll be able to move forward, and that those lines of communication are open, and that this process continues, because we cannot go back to the provocation of 2017.
It has to be frustrating for our president. When you're going to give up something so big and you're going to lift sanctions, you've got to have something big in return. He probably thinks in some sense this is a waste of time, traveled all the way around the world, and he's just going to give up one nuclear facility. Well, that's not enough. Thank you so much for being with us. I know you're going to be watching to see how they cover this in North Korea. You'll have to keep us posted.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meanwhile, our top story, President Trump flying home from Vietnam. No deal. But Dan Bongino says the president is playing this just right. He joins us live from Vietnam. Coming up now.
In Vietnam, President Trump cutting the North Korea summit short.
Right now, the president is on Air Force One heading back to Washington, saying Kim Jong-un refused to denuke all of North Korea and demanded all sanctions be lifted. And that was a deal he couldn't do.
But at this time, we had some options, and at this time we decided not to do any of the options. Sometimes you have to walk, and this was just one of those times.
Yeah, it seemed like the absolute right decision. The president stressing talks with North Korea are not over. He says he's looking forward to meeting with Kim Jong-un in the future. He also said, I'm not going to go back to military exercises. They're too expensive, and others have speculated that would be somewhat provocative. It's almost as if Kim Jong-un had decided to go back to missile testing.
Ed Henry is live in Vietnam for us. Ed, they go to the table. The president says the only way I'd ever lift sanctions is if you denuke. And Kim Jong-un said, I'll denuke one facility. Not enough, right?
Correct. Ainsley, you're exactly right. And that is the sticking point here. We've been covering this for several days. We worked through the night on this, following every last detail. And I can tell you it got dramatic because it started out with word that there would be some sort of a signing ceremony at 2 a.m. Eastern time. And all of a sudden, the White House pulled that and said, no, it's going to be a news conference with just the president alone. What was the sticking point? What changed? What we've dug out is that the president learned from Kim Jong-un that he would only denuke, as you say, on Yongbyon, which is one nuclear facility. And the president seemed to surprise Kim Jong-un with U.S. intelligence showing there's a whole bunch of other facilities, warheads, missiles that the U.S. wants on the table as well. So the president, backed by Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, said no deal, because quite simply, we are not going to lift all U.S. sanctions in exchange for you only denuking partly. Nonetheless, the president said he's still optimistic optimistic that after Kim Jong-un goes home, thinks about it, realizes his desperate economic situation, he may come back to the table and sign a deal. Why is the president confident of that? Something else dramatic happened that while you were sleeping that you've got to pay attention to. U.S. reporters got a chance for the first time ever to ask questions of the dictator, Kim Jong-un. He actually answered some of them, including one in which he was pressed, are you willing to denuclearize? Listen to the answer.
Chairman Kim, are you ready to denuclearize?
If I'm not willing to do that, I won't be here right now.
That's a good answer. Wow, that might be the best answer you've ever heard.
So he said, if I did not want to denuclearize, I never would have come here. The president, as you heard, said that may have been the best answer. So here's the point. They develop trust. They make progress. In the end, they don't have a deal in writing now. But I can tell you, the president on down, senior officials I've spoken to, they are confident that after, some cooling off, they may have another summit and they may actually get a deal down the road, guys.
You know, Ed, for Kim to say he's willing to denuke, he doesn't say, I'm willing to denuke the whole country. And at the table, apparently, Pompeo and the intel community said, okay, there's a lot more you've got hidden that we know about. So you know what? Let's put all the cards on the table, not just that one.
Yes, and the president told the international press that he believes that he surprised Kim Jong-un with this intelligence, that Kim Jong-un seemed taken aback that the U.S. knew a lot more about his nuclear program than we've let on in previous meetings and that he ever expected. So that may have really backed him into a corner as well.
Also, Ed, what about what they actually ate at the meal gave clues to the success or failure of this summit?
Here's what I've picked up from sources. There's an interesting nugget. Back in Singapore, they had a meal. A source of mine went in the room after and noticed something interesting. All of the American plates were clean.
Yeah.
All of the North Korean plates, they didn't eat. Why? They were afraid back then, last June, that they might be poisoned. They couldn't trust the U.S. What happened this time? Yeah, the lunch sort of got scrapped today, but last night they had dinner. A separate source tells me that what they did was the Americans decided, they sort of went Dutch. The Americans brought steak to the table, and the North Koreans brought shrimp. And this time, everyone seemed to eat. There was trust this time. They didn't have that last time in Singapore. Again, I'm being clear. It wasn't enough to get a deal this time.
Sure.
But trust is being built, as the president said, slowly but surely.
I thought you were going to say, like in the movies, let's switch plates.
Yeah, no, I think Kim Jong-un, he sleeps with one eye open because he's concerned about his grip on power. He's also concerned about whether or not he can eat food that's given to him because he might be poisoned. This time, who can turn down American steak?
Exactly right. Well, Ed Henry has just revealed that some of his sources are waiters, apparently, in Vietnam.
I think busboys.
I'm not going to reveal.
Busboys know more than waiters because they got to clean the plates.
You're getting warm. You're getting warm.
Bus people, I should say, so no one sues me.
Yes.
Ed, thank you very much.
That's PC.
Also, not far from where Eddie is right now is Dan Bongino. He is also in Vietnam this evening there. Well, Dan, the president said this is a bad deal for the country, so I'm walking away. What do you think?
Well, a couple points on this, Steve. I've been watching some of the online feedback, and it's almost comical watching the far left attack the president. Remember, Steve, it was just a couple days ago that some of the same liberals were saying, oh, this would be awful if Trump's going to give away the farm. It's going to be terrible. He's not going to get anything in return. So then all of a sudden, Trump doesn't get the deal he wants. He walks away, and now they're attacking for no deal. It's like level 4 Trump derangement syndrome. It just seemed to infect everyone. But secondly on this is not a failure. Reagan walked away at Reykjavik with Gorbachev over SDI, the Strategic Defense Initiative, pejoratively known as Star Wars at the time by the left, and got a better deal later on. This was a good move by Trump. I'm glad he did it. This was not a failure.
Yeah, we'll see where we go from here. Donald Trump chose Sean Hannity to speak to his only interview. Here's what he said about not signing any deal.
Well, and we're working towards something, but we didn't sign anything today. It didn't quite work out. I would say that I wasn't satisfied, and perhaps he wasn't satisfied. Good relationship, but I decided that this wasn't the right time to sign something. So we'll see what happens over a period of time.
We'll see what happens over a period of time, which is interesting because yesterday at this time, we heard the president say when he was adjacent to Kim Jong-un that he looked for a beautiful relationship or a wonderful relationship and things will work out long term. We're back to that long term thing again.
Yeah, well, Steve, listen, the timeline here, he said yesterday, Donald Trump, a couple of times that he was in no rush, and that's a good, that's a good base point to be because we don't have yet a full accounting of even how many nuclear weapons the North Koreans have. But not only that, Steve, we don't have an accounting of their technological capabilities either. I keep bringing up the idea of reentry vehicles. That's important. In order to attack us, you have to be able to get a missile up, but you have to be able to bring it down, too. And to be able to know what they can do technologically is important. And it's clear at this point, at least, that Kim's not willing to tell us, and the president's not going to make a deal until he finds that out.
Yeah, the president sat down, obviously, with Sean Hannity, as Brian was just alluding to or talking about, and we showed you that one clip. There's another clip we want to show you because he did say, I will denuke. And remember at the table, Ed Henry was just saying that he told the reporters, I wouldn't be here if I didn't want to denuke. But he told the president, I'm only willing to denuke one facility. And this is his biggest carrot. It's called the Yibong Nuclear Scientific Research Center. There are about 400 buildings there. But everyone's wondering, what would they do with all the stuff that's in these buildings? They'd probably move it to some other facilities that we know that they have. Here's a clip from that interview with Sean.
Well, they wanted to denuke certain areas, and I wanted everything. And the sanctions are there, and I didn't want to give up the sanctions unless we had a real program. And they're not ready for that, and I understand that fully. I really do. I mean, they spent a lot of time building it, and that doesn't mean the world has to be happy. But I wanted them to denuke.
All right, Dan, what's your reaction?
Well, what I think the president's talking about is it's not just the production facilities for these nuclear weapons. Kim, from what we're hearing, was willing to give up Yongbyon in conjunction for some sanctions relief. There's also storage facilities. There could be hundreds, there could be thousands. And when I say a full account, that's what I'm talking about. We need to know where they're storing them as well. It doesn't do us any good to denuclearize a facility if he's got 10 or 20 hidden in bunkers and he hasn't told us about them either.
And we have to be able to inspect.
And I'm pretty sure yeah, IAEA access would be great, but yeah, absolutely. It's got to be part of the deal.
Part of yesterday's deal was 8-9 hours of Michael Cohen, and a lot of people asking a lot of explosive questions. And Congressman Jim Jordan probably made the most news by basically characterizing who he thought Michael Cohen was.
Here we go. Your first big hearing, your first announced witness, Michael Cohen. I want everyone in this room to think about this. The first announced witness for the 116th Congress is a guy who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress.
I am sorry for my lies and for lying to Congress. I have lied, but I am not a liar.
Is there a difference?
Yeah, you know, nothing screams credibility, Brian, like a convicted liar lying about lying while having a Clinton acolyte lawyer sitting over his right shoulder in Lanny Davis. I mean, do you understand how many times he stepped on himself yesterday, Cohen? Let me just give you one big one. He comes out at one point and says, listen, Trump never took the campaign seriously. He thought it was an infomercial for his business to build his brand. And then no less than an hour later, he tells Debbie Wasserman Schultz, oh, no, he would have done anything to win this race. What is it, Mike? Did he treat it like an infomercial to build his brand, or would he have done anything to win? He can't get out of his own way. And the big headline yesterday from this this fiasco, this circus up there, this embarrassment, was that the dossier and the collusion hoax are now dead. It's over. Again, I know the TDS-infected liberals, you're going to keep running with this thing. When Cohen said he wasn't in Prague, it's over. It's done. The case is dead. That was the whole dossier, Cohen being in Prague. It's done. They need to let it go.
But you know what? It sounds like Mr. Cohen may actually be in more trouble because Mark Meadows from the great state of North Carolina announced that he was making a criminal referral. He asked Mr. Cohen about, didn't you take $1.2 million from Novartis, and didn't you represent a Kazakhstan bank? And he said, yeah, I did. He said, well, you're breaking the law with that. So he's essentially asking prosecutors to look into whether or not he could be charged with this, which would be many more years in prison.
You know the irony of this, Steve? that FARA, the Foreign Agency Registration Act, which he allegedly broke, according to his own words yesterday, Cohen, that's what they used to go after Manafort.
Right.
So what's Cohen and Lanny Davis and his Clinton paid-for legal counsel going to say? Oh, nobody prosecutes FARA. That's not serious.
So why
not
didn't
really. That's what they're going after Manafort.
Right. Dan,
now.
why didn't Mueller bring that up? Why wasn't that part of ultimately the Southern District of New York, which charged Mr. Cohen? Why wasn't that part of his trouble?
Because Mueller's not interested in anything other than keeping the heat on Donald Trump and keeping the heat away from the Democrats. I mean, Steve, it's clear as day at this point. Mueller's not a white hat. I'm sorry. Mueller's not a good guy. He has not. Listen, I respect the man's service to the country. I want to get that out there. I mean it.
Marine.
But that does not make what he's doing right. Yeah. But he's not doing the right thing. A bunch of process crimes while ignoring all the crimes by the Democrats in this case is absurd.
And Dan, if anyone who listens to your podcast knows how detailed you know this whole thing, and we look forward to getting that final report. Meanwhile, one of the most explosive moments took place at the end of this hearing, and it all revolved around race. They didn't like the fact that one of our guests coming up a little bit later in this show is African-American, is black, and worked for the Trump administration for a long time. And part of Michael Cohen's comments were that the president's a racist. So when Mark Meadows brought up, because he a racist, he hired Ms. Patton, and she's now working for HUD, the second most powerful position in the HUD organization. Well, Rashida Tlaib goes after Mark Meadows, Patton, and the president.
Just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they aren't racist. And it is insensitive that some would even say the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself. Donald Trump is setting
Mr. Chairman, I ask that her words be taken down. It's racist to suggest that I ask her to come in here for that reason.
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not call Mr. Meadows a racist. I am trying, as a person of color, Mr. Chairman, just to express myself and how I felt at that moment.
Then Elijah Cummings goes on to say, we are best friends. He is not racist. Mark Meadows says, I have nieces and nephews that are of color. And he gets really emotional, and he looks like he's crying.
Yeah, that was a pretty disgusting exchange. I'm actually embarrassed for Representative Tlaib there. That was pretty gross. And listen, I'm not a huge fan of Elijah Cummings' politics, obviously, but a hat tip to him for saying about Meadows that, listen, this isn't right. I know Mark Meadows, and that's not who he is. It was at least one nice moment of bipartisan comedy there. But here's the thing on Meadows. If you have evidence that Donald Trump is a racist, don't you think people of color who worked for Donald Trump would be direct recipients of his said racism? And yet he brings up a person who says the exact opposite, and Representative Tlaib says, oh, she's nothing more than a prop, which Meadows is right. That's racist to say that. But that seems to have gone over her head completely.
Right. But I'll tell you one thing that seems pretty clear. They're going to end up calling up Ivanka, Eric, Donald Jr., and they're going to end up going with his CFO, and they're going to have the same series of questions. However, those individuals will back the president, unlike Michael Cohen, who was turned on the president.
They're not going to prison.
Yeah, they don't. Listen, they don't have anything. They've moved seamlessly from the collusion hoax, which has now been entirely debunked, to obstruction of justice. They have nothing there either. The president was executing his own constitutional duties, and now they're moving on to a bunch of processed financial crimes as they dig through his financial records. They're not going to find anything there either. They're getting desperate now.
Did you agree with Jim Jordan when he said the whole point of this is you weren't brought to the dance. You didn't get a job in the White House. There are multiple sources that have said he was begging for a job in the White House, and that's why he's furious with the president.
Ainsley, Twitter erupted yesterday with blue checkmark conservatives, prominent conservatives who know Cohen, who were involved in the transition. I mean, I could go through a list of names of people who were asked by Cohen hey, back me up while I'm trying to get the chief of staff job. Michael Cohen lied about it. He wanted a job in the White House worse than he wanted to take his next breath of oxygen.
Did he perjure himself
Everybody
yesterday?
knows it.
Did he perjure himself? Because he said, I did not want to go to the White House.
Yeah, I think he did. I think there'd be numerous witnesses to say what he said yesterday about not wanting to go to the White House is absolutely categorically false. He's already asked people to back him up in his bid to get that chief of staff job, and he was jilted, and he didn't like it.
Well, Eric and Don Jr. Tweeted out that he was, at the time, lobbying everybody to try to get a job. Dan, thank you very much for joining us from Vietnam. You've done some great reporting from over there. Travel safely back to Florida.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Great job. All right.
Meanwhile, talk about doing a great job. Jillian Mealy.
Oh, thank you very much. Keep going.
No, I have to go. That was
Okay.
my toss.
Fair enough. Let's get caught up in this story out of New York. A little girl dodges bullets as a man opens fire. This happened on the street of New York City. Surveillance video showing him pull out a gun with several people walking on a sidewalk. He fires 3 times with a little girl just feet away. She quickly turns around and runs to safety. Incredibly, no one was hurt. Police are still looking for the shooter. They think he was targeting another man. President Trump's border wall prototypes are coming down to make room for a new fence. Crews demolishing the concrete and steel panels on the border of San Diego and Mexico. President Trump has made several stops to evaluate the prototypes since they were put up last year. CBP says after there's no more use for them since Congress is blocking the construction of an actual wall. A majority of Supreme Court justices support keeping a giant cross statue dedicated to World War I soldiers. Critics say the nearly 100-year-old statue in Maryland is religious and doesn't belong on public land. But Kevin Bartlett, a veteran and counsel for the American Legion, tells Fox and Friends getting rid of the cross could spark a dangerous trend.
This has been here for a long time and something that we must protect because it's the tip of the iceberg if we don't stop this.
The court is expected to decide on the cross by the summer. Well, he started his career as a service dog for President next to the late president's casket went viral. So Sully continues on his mission.
More service for Sully.
Yep. So many stories there. It's the president, it's Sully with the plane, his namesake, and now he's helping individuals who have served our country who are sick.
That's great.
It is great.
Thank you very much, Jillian.
All right, well, this crime is sick. An 81-year-old man beat up over his Make America Great Again hat this morning, a break in the case.
And Nancy Pelosi says she's got a surprise in the Democrats' agenda.
We have 10 reserved for something special that will. You have to be ready.
I'm ready. What could it be? Michael knows. Looks like that. He has an idea.
Election fraud scheme in North Carolina. That man right there, Leslie McCrae Dowless, is accused of directing people to collect and fill in absentee ballots to help Republican Mark Harris win his congressional campaign last year. Harris claims he didn't know about it. Dowless denies any wrongdoing. 4 people working under him also face charges. And Beto O'Rourke could be skipping a Senate run in Texas to make a 2020 White House run. O'Rourke releasing a statement to the Dallas Morning News saying, quote, Amy, his wife, and I have made a decision about how we can best serve our country. We are excited to share it with everybody soon. It's unclear exactly when Beto will reveal that decision. So stay tuned. All right, Brian.
I say he's in. He evidently likes Senator Cornyn and didn't want to run against him. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi laying out House Democrats' 2019 agenda. Here you go. Her focus includes a climate bill, background checks on gun sales, and the DREAM Act. But the last item of her list hints there's more coming.
And then we have 10 reserved for something special that will. You have to be ready. You know, you have to be ready.
Wow, what could that surprise be from Nancy Pelosi? Let's ask Michael Knowles. He's host of the Michael Knowles Show. Michael, you have a theory on what that could be.
In typical Pelosi fashion, I guess we're going to have to pass her special plan to see what's in her special plan. She's clearly implying impeachment here. If you look down that laundry list, the first 9 planks, they're all a typical leftist Democrat wish list. And the only one that remains is this question of impeachment. I suppose the other leftist plan that wasn't included in there is Medicare for all, but that would be redundant when you look at the lowering prescription drug prices part of it. So the key here is plausibility. All of those planks for Nancy Pelosi, a master political manipulator, are plausible. President Trump wants an infrastructure plan. She seems to think that she can pry away enough Senate Republicans to get equal pay for equal work and all of those sort of feel-good titled proposals. And President Trump has portrayed himself as the most pro-LGBT GOP nominee. There's at least a little plausibility to all of these planks. And then the one area that she certainly has within her control as Speaker of the House, she's got a fairly unified caucus, is impeachment. She doesn't want to say it right away because it's a very politically volatile aspect of this new Congress, but she's clearly keeping it in her pocket.
All right, but ABC did a poll, and she might have read this. Not good news for that move. For all Americans were asked, what do you think about impeachment hearings? 40% say good idea, 55% say not. So if she's looking to get momentum for the election, that's probably not the way to get voters. So we could always speculate. A couple of things here. The DREAM Act, too, because if the president wants to do a bigger deal as it relates to immigration, the DREAM Act. Infrastructure, you could do something there. If not, the Republicans know what it's like to have the House and not the Senate or the presidency. You come up with ideas, and they don't even get voted on in the Senate. So it just becomes spitting in the wind.
That's right. I think that Nancy Pelosi is actually trying to work here. She is a manipulator. She does want to accomplish something. And as you say, there are certain areas where she could possibly work with the president. I think that number 10 is a threat. You're right that right now it is just not politically popular to impeach the president. His favorability ratings are fairly high. However, what she says is this is going to be special. There's nothing special about ordinary legislation. There is something special about impeachment. She says we've got to be ready. What are we going to be ready for? Anything that comes out of these endless investigations that they're launching, and if the president won't play ball with her.
And you know, it's on the top 2 list of almost every poll in terms of people's concern, health care. If the Republicans don't get something together on health care, they're not going to be successful in 2020. Maybe the prescription drug thing is the time they can maybe meet halfway in between. Michael, it will be interesting to see. We'll look forward to hearing more about that on the Michael Knowles Show.
Good to see you.
All right. Meanwhile, 2 minutes before the bottom of the hour, unless my clock's wrong, the second summit wrapping up without a deal. But was it still a success long term? We have commissioned a panel to talk about that next. I believe that's them. Plus, the video is crazy. A truck flips over during a high-speed police chase.
On his way back to the United States via Air Force One without a deal after Kim Jong-un refused to denuke all of North Korea, while Kim was demanding that all the sanctions be lifted. The president said, "Are you kidding? That's a terrible deal for us. I'm leaving." Here to weigh in our panel, former State Department official David Tafuri, along with national security analyst Dr. Rebecca Grant, and Screen Right syndicated columnist Micah Halpern. Good morning to all of you. All right, David, we were at this desk yesterday. We didn't see this coming. The president apparently it was bait and switch. Kim said, come to Vietnam, let's meet, we'll do a deal. And then at the last minute, it was a bad deal.
I think everybody was surprised by this result. You know, they had a signing ceremony, so you thought there would be some document.
Well, they were supposed to at 2 a.m.
Right, they were supposed to have one. It was scheduled. It got canceled. But you expected there was going to be some document that both were willing to agree to and to sign. It sounds like Pompeo just was not comfortable with the terms. He advised the president of that, and the president agreed with Pompeo. So the president made a good decision here by walking away, but the summit itself was a failure.
Just like that. Rebecca, you know, Dr. Grant, that is to say, you know, one of the things is apparently Kim said, okay, we'll denuke this great big facility that everybody knows about. But you got Mike Pompeo there, who used to be the CIA director, and he knows, hey, we're on to you, buddy. You've got all these hidden places all across the country. And the guy goes, I'm not touching those. And the president said, well, sanctions are such a big enchilada. I'm not going to get half a loaf for that.
And that's why I think they made progress in Hanoi, even though the outcome was disappointing. If we had seen this outcome after Singapore, we'd have said, look, they talked, they made progress, they got closer. We wanted a big deal. It didn't happen. But for me, the key takeaway, still no missile tests. And if this is all we get out of it, that alone was worth it, Steve.
Just like that. But we've had that for a while.
We have. But our general there, Robert Abrams, has said this is a palpable reduction of tensions on the peninsula. And my take on this is, well, I wouldn't want to be Kim Jong-un going back to North Korea with a dissatisfied elite looking for assassins around every corner without a deal. I think we'll see more negotiation. This is not over.
Micah, I don't think Kim Jong-un is used to Americans walking away from North Korea deals.
No question about it, actually. But if I were advising the president at this point, going into the summit, I would have said, walk away. His head is getting too big. Don't let him take this away with him. Rather, plan to leave. And I think that probably that's what was happening also.
Don't you think right now Kim is going, man, I shot myself in the foot. Can we reschedule this summit for tomorrow?
Well, no question. The reality is that the United States, specifically Trump, walked away from the Iranian deal, which was already signed. So they have to know, and Kim has to know, that there's a lot of power there. You just can't get what you want because you ask it. You've got to do something in order to follow up. And that wasn't happening. And as a result, Trump had to, and knew in advance that this was going to happen. Right. There's no doubt about it.
David, what Kim wanted, he wanted, I'll denuke part of my stuff, but I'm going to keep some other stuff all lit up. But he wanted all the sanctions lifted. So clearly that's a sign that they're killing him.
That's exactly right. And remember that Dan Coats, at the end of January, did an intel assessment that said that North Korea did not really intend to give up its nukes. Right. President Trump didn't believe him, didn't believe his intel officials who informed him of that. It turns out that probably was true. Kim Jong-un had no intention of taking real steps going forward to denuclearize, especially not without dropping all of the sanctions, which was a no-go for America. The problem now for me is I don't know how we get to a third summit. This first summit was fine, as you said, and just having a summit was an accomplishment. But the second summit had to have concrete steps forward. It didn't. So you can't go into a third summit without having something accomplished now. Now, in order to have a third summit, Kim Jong-un has to give up something in advance. That's the only way the president can save face and go into a third summit. So now things are stalled.
Well, Dr. Grant, you would think that the fact that the president flew halfway around the world, they probably had already baked into the deal, okay, we're going to say this at the end, and it's going to be a win for everybody. Obviously, there was some sort of bait and switch. Kim was able to entice him to come to Vietnam for this summit, but ultimately, it was not a good deal. And I think David's right. It's going to be hard for them to have a third meeting because the president, who says he's got a good relationship with the chairman, you know what? Look at this relationship. The guy just turned on me. I thought I had a better deal coming in.
Well, history would tell us that there probably will be a third meeting. It took, Steve, 4 years to denuclearize Ukraine back in the early 1990s. Nixon and Brezhnev met 3 times. It took 3 presidents to get the second big strategic arms control treaty in the late 1970s. I think we'll see them meet again, and I think actually some progress in that relationship was made in Hanoi between Kim and Trump, and that's a good takeaway.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. Shimon Peres used to say all the time, you don't make peace with your friends. So what happens here is the teams now have to work. After that, we'll see what happens. We're moving in small steps. Small steps is how you really come to an agreement, not in these grandiose expressions like huge and spectacular. Small steps, and that's actually a mature statement by Trump. Surprisingly, but enormously mature.
All right. Well, President Trump flying back on Air Force One, and Kim is back on his train. Good luck. David and Dr. Grant and Micah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right. 21 and a half minutes before the top of the hour, and Jillian's got some news.
And that's right. Good morning to you, Steve, to you at home as well. Let's start with this. A teenager is arrested for beating an elderly man over a MAGA hat. The 19-year-old is facing assault charges after allegedly throwing the 81-year-old to the ground and tipping his shopping cart over. This happened outside of a New Jersey supermarket. The victim suffered minor injuries. A previously deported illegal immigrant and convicted child rapist gets less than 2 years in prison for illegally re-entering the country. Honduran national Juan Raymond Vasquez was deported in 2009, but came back into the U.S. 5 years later. Despite federal agents placing a detainer on him, Philadelphia police let him go. He went on to repeatedly assault a 5-year-old girl, which he later pleaded guilty to. His new sentence will be served on top of an 8 to 20-year sentence for the assault. A semi-truck tips over.
Holy oh my God.
Oh my God, it's right. The rare catch happening off Navarre Beach. It took over an hour to reel in the 10-foot shark. The fishermen tagged it before releasing it back into the Gulf.
Wow. Beach. Note to self. Not going there this summer.
I know.
Catch and release.
I'll tell you, that thing's dead. That shark was dead.
I don't think so.
Believe me, I guarantee. If you go on that tracker, that shark is dead. Believe me.
Well, there you go.
That should be sushi. Right,
Brian.
Janice Dean, is that right?
I'm sorry. I was talking to my new friends here from Florida and North Carolina. Hi, what's your names?
I'm Wendy.
Raina.
Ellen.
Jean. Beautiful family. And how old are you today? 13. Happy 13th birthday. What would you say the New York weather is here right now? Cold. Cold. Excellent answer. You know what? Let's take a look at the maps because we are expecting a little more snow across the New York area and more cold, my friends. Winter is hanging on for dear life across the southern U.S. Look, it's 18. These are wind chills, by the way. 18 it feels like in Dallas, minus 15 in Fargo, feels like 22 in New York City. So we had a little system move across the Northeast overnight tonight and into today. We're expecting another one tomorrow, just a quick mover. The potential for a little bit of rain across the Southeast, maybe some thunderstorms, and then across the Midwest, more snow in the forecast. Across the West Coast, we're dealing with another system this weekend and perhaps a nor'easter as we head into Sunday and Monday. When are you guys leaving? Sunday. Okay, well, check in with the forecast. Hi, come on over here. Where are you from, real quick? New Zealand. Where? New Zealand. Oh, very nice, New Zealanders. Welcome to New York. All right, wave to Steve Ainsley and Brian. Look at this at 6:30 in the morning. It's fantastic.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Woo! Good morning.
Thanks, Janice. All right, 18 minutes before the top of the hour. Convicted liar Michael Cohen apologizing to Congress for lying. But was there any truth in his testimony? The judge thinks there's some trouble for the president in that, and that's what the judge looks like when he sits there in the corner.
Plus, forget rock stars. Rolling Stone magazine is putting Democrats on the cover.
Collusion with the Russian hoax. And I said, I wonder why he didn't just lie about that, too, like he did about everything else. I mean, he lied about so many different things, and I was actually impressed. The fact is there is no collusion, and I call it the witch hunt. This should never happen to another president. This is so bad for our country.
President Trump responding to Michael Cohen's testimony on Capitol Hill.
Here to react, Fox News senior judicial analyst and the host of Liberty File on Fox Nation, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, you think the president's got a few landmines here after that testimony?
Well, if the testimony is true, now look,
that's a big if.
It's an enormous if. Look, the government often has to put creeps on the witness stand to testify against the people the government is prosecuting. The government can't pick and choose who the eyewitnesses to particular events were. So the government is accustomed to that. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is this guy's already been convicted of perjury. False in one, false in all. Who would believe him? A third way to look at it is he's going to jail for perjury. Right. Does he really want to perjure himself again? Because he'd be going to jail for 3 or 4 times as long if he perjured himself again.
So he's going to prison for lying to Congress.
Yes.
There he was talking to Congress.
Yes, and he's also going to prison for lying to the IRS by falsifying tax returns.
So where's the problem for the president?
The problem is in a couple of areas. When Michael Cohen produced a copy of a check, which is on the front page of a couple of newspapers this morning, personal check signed by the president while he was president. Right. That's an obligation the president had to Michael Cohen. When the president filled out his financial forms that everybody's required to fill out when you work for the federal government, who do you owe money to? He said nobody. So that was an error under oath. Was it an innocent error, or was he trying to disguise the obligation to Cohen?
That Michael Cohen did for him after he signed that form. Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility, but it's not a probability, because according to Cohen, again, if Cohen is to be believed, it was reimbursement for the hush money. I don't know where this is going to go. I think most people saw through Michael Cohen yesterday. If you like the president, Michael Cohen was a liar and a bitter guy trying to get back at somebody that he's no longer his friend. If you dislike the president, there's a treasure trove of stuff here with which to torment him.
But Judge, here's the thing: he's going to talk about his taxes. The president lied on his taxes, lied about insurance, lied about payments. And if it's just his words, that's one thing. But it looks as though that committee wants to investigate more. Bring in the CFO, bring in Ivanka, bring in Eric.
In my opinion, you're correct. And in my opinion, what we heard yesterday is enough for the committee to justify doing that. Right. And it's enough for the committee to justify subpoenaing his taxes. Why do they need his taxes? Right. Other than to torment, embarrass, humiliate him?
But then again, ultimately not impeachable.
In my opinion, nothing yesterday was impeachable.
All right. Judge, thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right. Straight ahead, President Trump addressed the escalating tensions between 2 growing nuclear powers overnight after 2 military planes shot down. Congressman Michael Waltz says this could have a ripple effect on the United States. He joins us live coming up.
Plus, Lara Logan is here live in the studio coming up as well.
Along, even though it's hard, even though it's difficult, has to lead in that part of the world and stay involved.
India also has some pride. We remember the Mumbai massacre. They never really felt they got redemption on that. Do you think there's pressure on them to act strongly, real quick?
Well, there is, and I was with Vice President Cheney when that happened in 2008. Both arsenals were spinning up, and it was only through effective U.S. leadership and engagement and having a presence over there that the United States was able to tamp that down. So all the more reason. Look, at the end of the day, Brian, when the United States withdraws, bad things happen and fill the vacuum. We have to fight these wars over there and stay engaged, or it's going to follow us home in a big way.
And that's got to be explained to the American people. It's not just an endless war. It's a stabilization in the area, and we're doing what the Russians did, and we care about the people. We're not just looking to take their raw material. Congressman
That's
Michael.
right. Well, and again, half the world's terrorists